So, thank you for joining everybody. In this panel discussion, we're going to be talking about the latest trends in cyber. In this panel, participating in this panel today, we have Jeffrey Dennis and Matthew Lefchik, and soon to be joining us, hopefully, we'll have David Divergaidis. I believe that's how you say his last name. And, again, we'll be talking about the latest in cyber. And so I'll turn it over to you, Jeff and Matthew, to talk through the topic.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kathy. So we're going to cover three topics over the next 30 minutes or so. And I'm sure David will pop in, and then we can put him on the spot since he's running a little bit late. We'll have some fun with him. But we're going to be talking about three things. First, sort of the new trends and risks that we're seeing related to cybersecurity. We're going to talk a little bit about risk mitigation techniques, and finally, some of the risks that are associated in today's new normal, whatever that might be, with folks returning, actually either working remotely, and then again, risks with returning to the office. So let's start with just sort of the new trends and risks, and I promise you that Matthew and I haven't scripted any of this, so we're going to sort of dance around all three of these topics. But Matthew, why don't we? I'm not going to moderate. I'm just going to ask the first question, then let's go. But what are you seeing in terms of new trends and risks in the cyber world?
So, Jeff, thanks a lot for teeing that up. And one of the topics I love to bring up is it takes about it's a cliche comment, but in a way, it's just every 39 seconds a hacker will attack. And being that this is a 30-minute window, there's 1,800 seconds within this session. There's going to be 46 attacks that just occur within this session. Think about that, folks. That is why we're having these kind of discussions. And then you quantify that about the amount of seconds within a day. There's going to be over 2,200 attacks per day. And that is why we're really looking at it from Jeff's standpoint, from the legal standpoint, and from mine as, Know International, we specialize in cyber risk and personal. And, we're going to look at how you can actually minimize your risk profile. And some of the different emerging risks, it's nothing really changing or evolving that you may have not have heard. It's how their sophisticated attacks are coming in. And what I mean by that is phishing attacks. As simple as, social engineering, an email that comes into you, obviously that is very prevalent right now because you're naive or you're very busy with the nuances of working from home. But also think about this, since we're all working from home now, endpoint security is going to be a key factor. You can play into it a couple of other scenarios of, looking at Internet of Things and the cloud integration that is, being very focused in some of the different companies that are, teeing up how they actually do business continuity plans nowadays because of these policies are changing and so on. So that's one of the ways that I would think we should be looking at as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matthew. I think that you hit it, right on the head in terms of the risks. I'm not sure that the risks have changed all that much, but you're right. The ransomware and social engineering in particular is becoming much more sophisticated. I had a client who I brought on board last week who was suffering from a straight social engineering attack, which resulted in some wire transfer fraud. Same old story, but I'm telling you, looking at these emails, these guys are good, and the cyber criminals are running these things as a business. This is no longer just some kid sitting in his basement shooting off poorly worded emails. These have become well-organized machines, and they are making a lot of money in cyber risk. So I think they're all becoming more sophisticated. The other thing that I think we're seeing right now in particular because of this work from home situation is that we're seeing, a lot more of these brute force attacks on RDP ports or remote desktop protocols, because there's so many more of those in use right now. We're seeing those sort of skyrocket. And when I step back and look at it, though, I also see the silver lining, right? Because of the COVID-19, because we're all working from home, and there have been so many, sort of high-level security breaches that have been very well publicized recently. The silver lining is that I think maybe for the first time, because we've all become a remote workforce and we're all dealing with these issues, people understand, or beginning to understand, the importance of cybersecurity, and for this group, the importance of cyber liability insurance. I think in today's world, it's an absolute must to carry cyber liability insurance, particularly if you're you have any sort of sensitive personal information or personal information in your systems.
Yeah, let me, piggyback off of that. And I actually agree too, because in my kind of field, we see that a lot of people say, what's the value of having cyber insurance if I'm already building out some prevention and detection models? Putting some particular layers in to minimize my risk profile. And, the details are there's no silver bullet, and you're just trying to minimize and put an additional layer within your risk profile. And that's what we need to address. To build that awareness, and that awareness, Node International kind of looks at it as 3 holistic approaches, because we do drive the insurance side, but I would suggest saying that prevention and detection are very key. What I mean by that prevention is, historically, this, everyone wants that counseling, consultative support on kind of what are some of the nuances, what should I be looking at, what are some of the compliance frameworks. But if you're not looking at a risk analysis or risk score, or even we actually execute through a partnership of our InfoSec partners, a ransomware stress test. If you're not evaluating what that risk profile is and then understanding what those gaps may be, how can you actually measure your overall systems and your approach overall? And then the detection model, we play that into another partnership is, you're only as good as your best of breed approach and kind of who you're using from an endpoint protection, from an actual SIM monitoring, and building out those additional layers are going to really give you some insight on, identifying some key indicators of a compromise, as you mentioned about remote desktop and so on. Are you looking just at your overall network, the front of the network, or are you actually looking at lateral movement and so on? So those are some compelling questions that need to be asked. And I will say this is, it's ironic in the insurance industry, a lot of people don't want to ask more questions in regards to some of these applications based on how they receive a quote because of where the market is today. But as you're seeing the trends are being what? More attacks are coming in, premiums are raising up, the rate calculators are raising up, but maybe the actual client's base is not moving up with them. So in hand, I understand that they don't want to overstep their boundary by asking their clients or their insurers or their brokers, retail agents more questions. But that is the first line of defense is build your awareness. And especially from your background, I would think you'd have to ask more questions to understand what that overall risk profile is.
Well, absolutely. And then Matthew, maybe, you've, I'm sure, seen this as I have, is that, when we were working with placing cyber risk policies for our clients 5 years ago, it was a one-page document that underwriters would be sending us with about 6 or 7 very general questions that I'm not sure you could answer incorrectly. And now what we're seeing is we've got underwriters sending pages and pages of questionnaires, wanting backup, wanting access to systems, ensuring that you have all of this in place. And it makes sense, right? Because what we're talking about now is really this whole mitigation techniques. And they are important not only to the consumers and the companies, but they're also important to the carriers. I'm a big believer in proactivity. I have never given a presentation on cybersecurity or privacy without using the word training about 45 times. The training aspect is of such vital importance that you can't overstate it, because again, human beings are the first line of defense and they're also the weakest line of defense. And unfortunately, that's just human nature. We're trusting people. We want to believe the best in folks. When we get an email from a long lost friend in Nigeria, we want to believe that they really need us to wire them $30,000 and that they'll pay us right back. But that's not the reality. So we've got to, in terms of from a risk mitigation standpoint, become proactive, train our folks, make sure that we are planning and protecting our systems to the very best of our abilities while simultaneously planning for the worst. And what I mean there is that, we are working with our clients really to develop very robust business continuity plans, incident response plans, and the carriers that I'm talking to are requiring those things. And if you don't have them and you have a problem, those may be some instances where coverage is going to be denied on that basis alone.
You bring up a great point, and for the people here, this is what's kind of unique. During an application 3 to 5 years ago, it was one sheeter. Now it's evolving. Where's your data sitting? Who has access of it? But you know what's kind of unique? You bring up when you actually are now hit with an actual attack, and then the claim comes in. What are typically questions that get asked from the claims division teams, from the carrier side, or from our standpoint, but then from your standpoint, from the legal standpoint, people are saying, well, what? Give me a summary of what happened. Tell me how you're handling the risk today, and how you're mitigating it, and how you're going to move forward in it. Well, if we're not asking those questions in the beginning before we get to that actual stage, then why are we asking it when the fire alarm is going off on that actual organization and the hot button of the ransomware or some kind of actual attack is occurring? And that's kind of scary that people are like, okay, now you have my attention. Which before it's like, hey, let's just think about this. I'll noodle some numbers. I'll get it back to you and we'll be totally done. And that's not the best approach when then we can do some breach, calculators. Look at the numbers associated to an actual premium or even a prevention or detection model with building that holistic approach. And then does that outweigh what the attack is going to appear? Business interruption, the brand, the integrity of the company. And then look at some of the different compliance standards. When you look at GDPR, CCPA, and so on, these attacks can actually really derail those organizations in a spiral that you don't want to see.
Absolutely. And again, I think the keys, and I probably sound like a broken record, is we need to be raising awareness in our companies, right? The businesses in general need to understand these attacks. And in my role as a counselor, as an attorney for these folks, it is to educate them so that they understand what risks they really are facing. And the back end of it is I then, help them build in protection through their, various contracts with vendors and with other suppliers and, supply chain. I mean, Matthew, we could talk for hours about that. That's a whole nother conversation, and then protect them on the back end if they've got a breach that they need assistance with in terms of a breach response or heaven forbid litigation. There are so many points in time where we can help, but I tell this to clients all the time, and they sort of smile and nod their heads. And I said, look, the best time to get people involved who can help you is at the front end. I said, it may cost you a little bit of money, but I guarantee you it's going to cost you 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 fold if you're not doing it now and you're trying to do it on the back end. And cyber liability insurance is a great tool and it can provide protection, but it's a last resort. It's if you're on that high wire, it's that net that's going to catch you right before you hit the ground, but it has holes in it. And if you're not careful about what you do, and if you don't have reasonable security, and if you just think, well, I can do whatever I want to do, or I don't need to do anything, I'll get covered in the end, you may be really, really disappointed. And it's changed. I mean, it was, we laughed about it 3 years ago when, ransom demands would come in and they would be $5,000. And people would say, oh, my carrier just didn't ask any questions. They just paid the $5,000 and everything was fine. And a lot of carriers stepped up and did that. Now, when you're averaging close to $200,000 per ransom demand or more, carriers are taking a different approach, and as they should, as you would expect them. I mean, they are in business not to lose money. I mean, people don't remember insurance is a business.
Yeah, the P&L of that, and I think you nailed it too. Like one way that we look at it and try to do something a little bit different from, truly where the market is today is, typically you hear, let me put some coverage on some risk. And I always say this all the time, and anyone else is out there that listens to some of our sessions, and I think you're just putting a Band-Aid on a cut, and you're not allowing, and you think that Band-Aid's going to allow that cut to not bleed, and that you're sadly mistaken, and or you're taking a risk and you're just binding it and saying, you know what, let's put you in a file cabinet. Node looks at it differently. What I mean by that is we want to take a proactive approach. I don't want to say, hey, Jeff, nice meeting you. Glad we bound you up. I'll see you next year and hope for the best that you don't get attacked with any cyber risk. Well, no, it's actually, our benefit as, we can see minimizing less claims to the insurer. They don't want to see their policy being triggered. To the broker relationships that are out there that are listening into this, you're developing how do you differentiate yourself within the marketplace? You're truly doing that by you're setting the stage correctly. So what we are doing is we proactively reach out within 30 days. We actually want to go through and do some touch points. Really, it's not that we're subjectively looking at what your application looked like, but we want to know, do you need some more resources? Do you need some more compliance? Do you need some more support in the tools and resources that you're capable? We provide a portal, and that portal gives them an abundance of actual support that they don't typically receive. They would actually have to go out and outsource from a CapEx perspective, spend a bunch on their P&L. Whereas this is actually included within our policy, and we provide that. And then we also want to take them through that journey. As you know, Jeff, that I don't want these clients just to be a one-time, but if we can reduce their risk overall in the next 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 years that they're working with us, that's a win-win for all of us, because then we're going to take their posture. Let's just say their risk profile is like a 4 or a 5. If we can get them to a 7 or a 9, that's a great milestone for them to achieve. And that's how we're trying to impact their business, so that, truly it is the last resort for them to actually look at cyber risk within actual insurance liability.
Right, and I love that approach. I mean, I think Node's doing it exactly the right way, and I think underwriters and carriers need to sit up and take notice that underwriting cyber risk is not if you're doing it as a single snap, you're making a mistake, because over the course of 12 months, systems change, employees come and go, the risk profile will change, it will go up and down dramatically. So I think that carriers need to, and brokers, and what you're talking about, Matthew, is exactly right. You need to have an ongoing relationship with your clients, because it's not only going to be good for them, but as you said, it's good for all of us. I mean, if you can do anything to head off a ransomware incident, or modify some cover to, deal with some new risks, I mean, think about what you're doing for the client, what you're building in for them, but also think about what you're doing for the insurance company. Minimizing
Absolutely.
claims is the name of the game. And the only way you can do it is to be proactive and really get in the trenches with your clients, and or hire folks who can get in the trenches with your clients to really understand and help them out. I'm a big proponent, and I've been selling this idea to carriers, is that you want, whether it's attorneys or technical experts, and probably the team, to go in sort of like a SWAT team, and barge through the doors of that company and really understand what's going on and what needs to improve. And because that's going to, and get them to move, and to at least start to act in a reasonable manner. I don't think, and you touched on earlier, Matthew, there's no such thing as perfect security. And you're not required to have perfect security. The GDPR doesn't require it. The CCPA doesn't. They use this term of art, reasonable security, which, again, that's the reason that, attorneys have jobs, because no one knows what that really means. But in my mind, it means that you understand where your system is, you understand its faults, you understand what needs to be done, and you're taking proactive steps to get there. It's not pretending like they don't exist. It's not, failing to have your system audited because you're scared of what somebody might find. You want to know. And I think carriers want you to know.
It baffles me when I speak to organizations and they say, we haven't really changed our controls or our strategy. And I think, we both know that most of these departments, they actually have to analyze their overall budgets. If they only, and we'll do simple math. If I ask for $10, I only spend $5. You think we're going to get, if I ask for $12 in 2021, you think our leadership team is going to provide it? Obviously not. So when I hear that organizations are like, we're not adapting, we're not changing, I really question that idea, because of the amount of licensing, the amount of controls, amount of where the actual team's dynamic will actually change. And now look at it. We went from literally no pandemic to everyone was in a brick and mortar, to now we're adjusting to a work from home environment. And those business continuity plans, let alone GDPR, don't even bring that up. Don't even bring CCPA. There's enough compliance standards that are outweighing what they should be attempting to do, based on some of these controls and test simulations that they should be actually acting on. So truly, it's like, ask more questions, build some awareness, get in touch with the right people, sit on these kind of conversations, and then spearhead it through test. Get involved, understand some of those challenges. And I also tell people, why are you allowing the same person to grade your own paper for the last 3 to 5 years? Do you really think they're going to tell you something that you've never been aware of? That's not what they're probably going to be trying to deliver to you, because they don't want to adapt that way. So you should challenge your own internal resources and teams and leadership groups by saying, you know what, we should actually work with some other teams and associations that can actually challenge our ways and our strategies.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. You know, I had a different client that came in probably 2 months ago, had some sort of social engineering attack, and they called me because they were worried that a lot of personal information had been exfiltrated, and said, you know, we have an MSP. So it was an SMB. They had an MSP that was running their their IT security and their IT systems. And they said, we talked to our IT folks, and they said, well, they couldn't find any security. And I turned to the guy and I said, why would you? And he said, so I think we're fine. I said, no, you're not fine. You can't look at your MSP, which may have been the problem in the first place, and think that they've got the answers, because it's not in their best interest to say, yeah, we screwed up. You need to bring in a third party, get it audited, see what's really going on in your system. And I want to very quickly, because we're running on time, sort of go quickly to this last topic. And we've touched on it, we've played with it, you know, a little bit here and there, and that is this whole idea of the risks associated with a remote workforce and returning to office. I'll tell you what I worry about the most. What I worry about, and this is again the paranoid cyber liability attorney coming out of me, is that I'm worried that we are going to have a whole slew of dormant viruses that have somehow made their way into personal computers that have been used at home. And when these dormant viruses get plugged back into your networks, that they will come to life and ravage your systems. That's bad enough. But here's what I'm really worried about as an insurance attorney. I'm worried that people are going to think, well, we have coverage for that. And they may or they may not, depending on how your cyber insurance policy defines your computer system or your network. It could absolutely exclude all personal devices or personal home computers. And I can see carriers making the argument that, look, that virus didn't start in your network. It started in an excluded device. You have no coverage. That's what I'm worried about. That's the main thing that I worry about as folks are returning to work. And then one other thing, and I'll turn it over to Matthew, and you mentioned it earlier, Matthew, traditional antivirus is not enough anymore. If you don't have a great, endpoint detection program and system in place, you're really behind the times. There are too many things happening in too many different areas that are spinning out of control for most IT departments. They're overwhelmed. Think about how hard it was for each of your companies to get you set up at home and working. Now think about the fact that was just probably step 1 of 10. The next 9 are trying to figure out how they protect you and they protect the system. So there's a lot going on, and I think there's a lot to be concerned about. But again, let's figure out the issues and get ahead of them. All right, Matthew, I've talked too long. The attorney in me is coming out. Go for it.
No, I think it's a balancing act as these IT providers or the teams that are associated within your internal resources, some of the challenges are they don't have enough of the details and understand what that risk is. So for you to say that, hey, I put an antivirus out, or I have 2-factor authentication, or my data sitting here, I'll say this. First of all, Node actually offers through our policy, we have work from home coverage. So we've already identified that and elaborated through all of our different channels of support that we do business with that. Our policy, that's one that I think I would tell everyone on this call is do a true compare and contrast analysis of your current policy, but then also on your cyber program and kind of some of the challenges that may occur with that. Because not everyone is the same. And when you think that there's one license or software or hardware very similar to another, and I think a lot of the senior leaderships of CISOs, ISOs, and so on, they have that challenging balancing act to actually understand which one is actually working within their best interest. So, I look at that and then, folks, one of the biggest ones that I kind of just recently talked about too on one of my posts that I've done is, look at everyone's now doing online shopping or online, like you were talking about, your access to your home and that network. But imagine the amount of PII, the amount of information you're using right now, just in general, your name, your address, where you work, and so on. And then that's why these bad actors are, playing these games and targeting certain individuals and groups that are, if you're going from one email, from your work, personal, you're doing 10 different tasks, you're working from home, you're trying to teach your kids, you're trying to feed them lunch. There's a balancing act there. So they're working the same capacity to actually target you and spoof you on these particular emails and so on. But my point is, on online shopping, you're providing all this data out there for people to collect. So think of it this way. The vendor that you're actually using now has all your data because that's how they can ship you the information. But guess who else is also looking at that data? The bad guys. And that's going on quite often. And they're really just compromising these particular accounts. And you look at Twitter, how that was, the manipulation with the insiders of those actual team members and so on. Basically, those bad actors pretending to be someone else. So it's alarming to see where some of these particular threat landscapes are coming in.
Absolutely. Well, Kathy appeared. That means we're out of time, I'm assuming.
We are. We're coming to a close. Is there any final thoughts that you guys want to share before we talk about what's up next?
I think the only thing that I would say, understand the complexity of the enemy and the fact that they are very sophisticated and becoming more sophisticated and using things like AI that we use defensively. They're now using it offensively. Understand that you need an enterprise-wide approach to all this, and please train the heck out of your people. Matthew?
Yeah, I'd say security awareness is going to be key. That's one of your first lines of defenses. But let's think about this as the associations of the groups that we all talk to. We're doing this open forum to broadcast and promote a certain technique, a strategy that you should build your defenses. The bad guys are using the same forum, the dark web, to then puncture your actual network. And they work in tandem to actually listen. So let's say, bad actor one hits the actual landscape within that organization. They're just basically marketing, saying, hey guys, come back into this network in the next 6 months. I got all their credentials. Here's how I did it. And they're just talking about it like on an open forum, as we're doing right now. So just think about the amount of exposure that's out there. So just understand from a personal and from a professional side of that as well.
Right. Excellent. Well, thank you both for your time, for your expertise. Jeff and Matthew, I think that, those lines of personal and work-related risks are intertwined these days. So it's good to have your insights and a heightened awareness of how important cyber security and risk management is in these times. So thank you both for your time and again, for your expertise.
Thank you, Kathy. And thanks to the audience for listening. It was fun. Thank you.
Appreciate having us.
Thank you.